Hey guys, so here's how you play Burn Aggro. First, you want to open up the deck and then delete it. Yeah, and then just find a better deck to play out there because, Burn Aggro is kind of ruining Legends of Runeterra. Ha, just kidding guys, the deck's not that bad, come on. Hey guys, it's Brother here, and welcome back to yet another episode of LoR Explained. If you're new to the show, LoR Explained is just me giving you tips and guides about all things Legends of Runeterra. On this channel, I'll be doing a lot of deck techs as well as some general gameplay and guides, so before we get started, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy this deck tech and want to see more, consider subscribing so you get updates every single time I post a video. And with that out of the way, today I'll be talking about Burn Aggro, and the goal of Burn Aggro is to play cheap, aggressive creatures that repeatedly pummel our opponent in the face until they die or are low enough to die to our burn spells. Now, right now, Burn Aggro is a pretty solid deck, and it's perfect for people looking for just quick, decisive games. And just a quick history lesson for those of you who didn't play before patch 1.2 rolled in, but Burn Aggro was the big baddie of Legends of Runeterra for a pretty long time. It was an extremely oppressive aggro deck that would make you concede in less than 4 turns if they had a crazy start. I mean, the deck's still able to do that, but before they just did it more consistently. And since the deck was super cheap to craft, everyone pretty much played it. I'm ashamed to say that even I gave in and played Burn Aggro for a bit, just for some easy wins. Luckily, the LoR devs knew that the deck was a little bit too oppressive, so they nerfed 2 cards, Broomcrew Rookie and Legion Saboteur. They lost 1 point of health each, and although Broomcrew Rookie is still a great inclusion, Legion Saboteur became a little bit too fragile for players, so people had to find a new 1 mana unit to fill its spot. And of course, the card that ended up filling up that spot is the Shroom Demon himself, Teemo. So Teemo is a 1 mana elusive 1/1 that says that when Teemo strikes our enemy, he plants 5 poisoned puff caps into their deck. Now, determining Teemo's value is kind of complicated because it all depends on how long Teemo lives and the odds of our opponent drawing poison puff caps. To get a decent amount from Teemo, we want to be attacking with him at least twice on our opponent's nexus before he dies, so he plants a few puff caps into our opponent's deck. And the dream scenario, of course, is that we want to attack with Teemo 3 times, level him up, and then attack 1 last time to double the amount of puff caps in our opponent's deck. This would be where our opponent pretty much concedes, but of course, that doesn't always happen when we're playing this deck, so worst case scenario, Teemo doesn't live very long, and we only get in 1 attack before he dies to a Vile Feast. In this situation, Teemo might have only dealt 2 to 3 damage max, 1 from attacking and 1 or 2 from the puff caps. Due to the randomness of drawing puff caps, it's never guaranteed that our opponent is going to be taking any damage from them at all, so they could totally just luck out. Overall, Teemo is a pretty solid 1 mana play, and I think that Teemo having elusive is really relevant because it makes him a good top deck if our opponent doesn't have any way to deal with elusive units. So Teemo might not have the consistent value that Legion Rearguard provided, but he makes up for it by bringing a crazy amount of damage potential to the table. So now that you have a good idea of what Teemo does, let's talk about the other units in our deck. In Burn Aggro, we want to start pressuring our opponent as soon as possible, and this means that it's important for us to have a 1-drop to start off the game. Luckily, alongside Teemo, this deck has 2 units to help us out with that. The first of which is Legion Saboteur, and Legion Saboteur is a 1 mana 2/1 that deals 1 damage to our opponent every single time it attacks. And at 1 health, Saboteur pretty much dies to anything. But the benefit is that regardless of where we are in the game, she is guaranteed to deal 1 damage. Most of the time, Saboteur is going to be able to get in 1 direct attack and usually trade up for something on its 2nd attack, which is a lot of value for a 1 mana creature. Next up is Precious Pet, and Precious Pet is just a 2/1 Fearsome Spider and probably gets in the most consistent damage out of all of our turn 1 plays. Fearsome makes it so that Precious Pet needs to be blocked by creatures with 3 or more power, and since there aren't that many 1 to 2 mana creatures in the game right now that have 3 damage, Precious Pet has an easy time getting in a few attacks on our opponent's nexus before they can actually get a creature that sticks. So our 1-drops are pretty important to our game plan. We want to be smacking our opponent from the get-go, so in our opening hand, we want to be mulliganing aggressively for our Teemos, our Saboteurs, and our Precious Pets. So moving our way up the curve, let's talk about our 2-drops. The majority of our units are going to be in the 2-drop slot, and they each have their own way of keeping the pressure going. So let's start off by looking at Legion Grenadier and Broomcrew Rookie. So Legion Grenadier is a 3/1 unit that deals 2 damage to our opponent's nexus when it dies. Grenadier is great because even if our opponent has blockers, we're guaranteed to deal 2 damage to their nexus. Plus, With a 3-1 stat line, Grenadier is going to be able to trade decently well into most of their creatures. Okay, so right now, you probably think that the most annoying unit in our deck is Teemo, but I'd say you're a little bit wrong, because this isn't League of Legends, and the most annoying creature in our deck is actually Broomcrew Rookie. Broomcrew Rookie is a 2-mana 1/3 that deals 2 damage every single time it attacks, and if that didn't really register in your head quite yet, I'll say it again. Broomcrew Rookie is a 2-mana 1/3 that deals 2 damage every time it attacks, and since Broomcrew Rookie deals 2 damage regardless of whether or not your opponent blocks and has a decent amount of health, it guarantees the most damage out of any unit we have. It's probably the best card in our deck, and I know I said that we should be mulliganing for our 1-drops, but this is one of the only units that I'm really happy to keep in my opening hand. Man, this card was crazy when it was at 4 health. Anyways, the last 2 units in our 2-drop slot goes hand in hand with one another. The first card is Crimson Disciple, which deals 2 damage to our opponent's Nexus if it survives damage. This puts our opponent in an awkward position and deters them from chump blocking since they don't want to trigger Crimson Disciple's ability. This is good for us because it usually means we can get in a free attack sometimes. Imperial Demolitionist deals 1 damage to one of our units in order to deal 2 damage to our opponent, and this card combos perfectly with Crimson Disciple since we can just ping Crimson Disciple for 1, trigger her ability, and deal a total of 4 damage to our opponent. This combo is pretty awesome, but we don't always have to save Imperial Demolitionist for this scenario. We can always just use it on one of our other creatures as well, like Broomcrew Rookie. And finally, the last card in our deck is Use Cast Salesman. Use Cast Salesman is a 3-mana 3/2 that creates 2 Caustic Casts, and Caustic Casts have Ephemeral and deal 1 damage to our opponents when they die. Offensively, we can use the Caustic Casts as a target for Imperial Demolitionist or Transfusion. Defensively, we can use the casts as chump blockers to buy us more time to draw into our burn spells, so Use Cast Salesman is pretty much just a flexible card that offers us a few options depending on where we are in the game. Overall, our creatures aren't anything too special. There are a few cute combos that we can do here and there, but remember, the goal of Burn Aggro is really simple. We just want to do as much damage as we can with our creatures so that they're in range of dying to our burn spells. So with that said, let's talk about our burn spells. First up, we have Mystic Shot, Get Excited, and Noxian Fervor, which all say that they can deal damage to pretty much anything. Number 1, don't be fooled by the word anything. Unless you really have to kill our opponent's units, please save your burn spells for our opponent's face. Every point of damage matters in Burn Aggro, so be careful when choosing what to target. Tip number 2, try to use Noxian Fervor reactively instead of proactively. What this means is that you want to bait out your opponent's spells first, and the reason why we do this is because if you aggressively cast Noxian Fervor onto one of our creatures, our opponent can respond by killing it. This would end up fizzling Noxian Fervor since it doesn't have a legal target anymore. But let's say our opponent is trying to kill our Broomcrew Rookie with a Grasp of the Undying. If we instead reactively respond by casting Noxian Fervor, we would deal 3 damage to our opponent, fizzle their Grasp of the Undying instead, and stop them from gaining 3 life. Keeping these little things in mind is really important when playing Burn Aggro. And finally, the last few cards of our deck are Static Shock, Decimate, and Transfusion. Static Shock is a great card because it helps get rid of chump blockers, pings our opponent for 1, and replaces itself with a card. Decimate is a 5-mana spell that deals 4 damage and just acts as a finisher for the deck. And finally, Transfusion just helps us push through more damage, save our creatures from removal spells, and can even trigger our Crimson Disciple to hit our opponent for 2 damage. So, to sum it up, Burn Aggro is pretty much just a really fast deck that depends on having a strong start. This deck wants to aggressively mulligan for 1-drops or Broomcrew Rookie, and wants to save their damage spells exclusively for the enemy Nexus. Overall, Burn Aggro is a solid deck for newer players to pick up since it's really cheap to craft and can win games pretty easily even if you don't know how to fully play the deck. Anyways, that about wraps it up for today's episode of LoR Explained. If y'all liked the video, please make sure to leave a like as it lets me know that you're enjoying the content. And of course, if you want to see more Legends of Runeterra Explained, click on that subscribe button and tap that bell icon to get alerts every single time I post a video. Till next time, peace.